Everybody, we're back for another episode of the Brush Sauce Theater Critiques. I'm joined by
Tyler,
Adam and Jess.
Tyler,
What's up?
Tyler. Sorry, give
All
me
right,
two
everyone. So
seconds.
this month's challenge was a moving fortress. It could be man-made or creature, walking boat, treads, rails, no flying. Needs to protect and transport massive gems. So what we did, there was a massive amount of submissions. So we each basically went through and dropped one in. So we did that 3 times. We each picked 3 pieces that we picked. Then we agreed upon a 10th one. And then at the end of this, I'll go and give my 2 cents on everybody's that wasn't selected. The other thing we're going to do differently for this month's, I haven't chose a next challenge yet. So I want you guys to list in the comments below, give me challenge ideas, and whoever's that I choose will be the next challenge, and I'll also contact you directly, and I'll hook you up with my new course, how the art of designing a picture, if yours is chosen as well. All right, so let's try that this month and see how that goes. So I'll put the next challenge info. It'll appear on the Discord, of course, link below under how the challenge works channel. That's where and then you submit them under challenge finals. All right, and I forgot to mention you can only list one challenge idea in the comment per person, so no spamming 20 different ideas. Just put forth your best one. All right. Hey guys, we're here with another episode of the Brush Sauce Theater. I'm joined by Adam and Jess. Thank you both for helping me critique these awesome entries. There was a lot. There was over 30. So
a lot of cool ideas.
Yeah. Let's just jump into these. We'll go through. All right. Chechatron. This one's cool. So we've got a giant moving. I like the contrast in the design setup on this. Let's start with that. Like it's clear. Like we have gray, we have white, we have black. It reads very well.
Mm-hmm. You made it read is really nice. I almost want to see the dark clouds on the top come down maybe a little further to kind of frame that green top a little more. Give it a little more dramaticness that really pulls the eye up into that area where the head of this thing should be.
I'm getting a little feedback from someone. Do you guys know who it is? Like, do you hear it? Like it's like a high pitched kind of whistling.
Tiny, like barely. Yeah.
Okay. We'll keep an eye on it. Yeah. So bringing that down, a little further, because I think what you're getting at, right? If we surround the dark area of the head and then you amplify the green glow, right, of the character's facial features,
warm it up.
That's what ticks a lot of cool impact right there. So just bringing that in, right, bring that in. You get the color dodge out. They kind of already did that, and then you can start really getting that. See, like the crystals, I feel like since the crystals are kind of glowing, or I think they should be glowing because it's kind of like that component on the creature. Like we should see that, first and foremost, kind of like that. So, really just get a lot of that to pop.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, and you could almost bring like a little bit of the rim light down around that top shoulder that would disappear into the clouds.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's the thing too. I think I would do with this one personally there is a matter of shapes and silhouettes that I would definitely push more. So I was always taught you should probably simplify a lot of the detail in the shadows, and I do notice with this piece, it is evenly detailed. It's evenly kind of presented for the light and for the shadow. And if it's anything I learned from Marco Bucci, it's like you can really simplify and imply a lot in the shadows without doing that equal amount of detail to them. Just for the sake of simplifying it. And then you could really bring in that fill light, over the forms.
Yeah.
To really kind of start to vignette things a little more subtly and nuance, and it can add a lot of volume, right, and dimension.
Yeah.
To that figure.
Beautiful.
The other idea too is you could really help sell the scale, right, with how big this is by getting some, not so noisy but distinguishable shapes kind of popping out, from.
That was the other thing was I felt like the bottom, the plane was kind of lackluster. It was just a sharp triangle coming across the bottom.
Yeah, it's a little vanilla. And
you have a lot of down there to build up a scene.
Yeah, some kind. You gotta help cell scale a little bit better. You know, even if you're, I think we're bringing in a little more atmosphere, kind of consuming, right,
Yeah.
the bottom part of that, and then of course you can, have that affect the tree elements and bring those shapes in and out. So like, yeah, it definitely like a little bit more could be done down there.
Yeah.
And then
You know what I would add to that too? Like since he's an organic rock, like kind of a golem type of creature, what could be cool would be to have imagine that he actually tore himself out of the earth and have some vines and stuff like that hanging off of him. I could add a little because he's little speckles of moss, but pushing those secondary shapes a little bit more could add a lot more dimension to the character.
yeah, a little
himself.
more narrative too.
Yeah.
And I don't think we need like he's really tall, really high up there, and I honestly think if you could add a little more impact to the overall scale, like essentially if we take like this whole bit of it or him rather, right? And then imagine just bringing that down so he's a little more in frame a little, because like we don't need to see all the legs, right, that he has to kind of sell the idea. So just in a way just moving that a little more down in a frame, and then right, just it's all about framing, like just cutting a little bit of that off from the legs, and like it doesn't really fundamentally change anything, but it frames our subject, just a bit better. And of course I
You know
made
what
a
we're
tangent.
missing too? We're missing movement. I recommend a little wisp of birds flying up towards its head
Yep.
to show scale too. That could definitely help.
And then I would do maybe a little something with the posing of the legs, because of the slight little tangents that's getting created here. See, like the
For
arm
the shadows.
hitting on, like I would definitely drop a lot of that, into shadow, and like it's a little flat. Like the forms are a little flat overall. Like if you can nail a lot of that into shadow, then if the light's hitting here, that's a great opportunity to get up under here, right, with awesome little nuanced bounce lights and things like that in some of the shadow areas. You could really add a lot of drama to a scene, like have that arm cast a shadow, into there, add the warm tones underneath there. There's like a lot of subtlety that this lacks that could really push it to the next level. Like, even before I shifted the character, the clouds are very, very kind of spotty and noisy. They're all like, if we look at it from a design perspective, it's all like the same little shape and brush doing the same little thing. It's like a bunch of popcorn back there, where it lacks a little bit more of that finesse that professionals can tend to put in with the sky. So a little bit of tweaks here and there,
Yeah, just design the shapes with the clouds the way that you design the shape of the creature, and design the shape of the landscape around him the same way.
Awesome picture. Thank you for
Yeah, a
submitting
lot of fun
it.
to play with a piece
Not
like that.
bad. Yeah, this is a great kind of marriage of design problem solving, embracing the challenge, and then building, kind of a keyframe illustration from it. I really enjoy this, and you can see even into the design work how much thought and how much care was put into every little detail of this image, and that's what really is great, and that's what a lot of professionals have to do, right, when it comes to setting up this type of scene, is really thinking it all through very thoroughly. Look at this. He's got creature
Very functional too.
and this is going to make a fantastic portfolio piece, either way. Like, look at this. Got it all set up there. I assume the power gems are in there.
They're under the tarps, as Tyler
Right,
said.
yeah, they're under the tarps. But this is great.
I think the first thing that pops out to me is there's not like one spot that my eye wants to rest on as being kind of the center or the heart of the piece. There's so much going on in so many different directions that it's all calling for attention. And so I would play with color and lighting to try and choose like what the heart of the piece is, and everything else serve that moment within the painting.
Yep.
Does anybody have a fan on or near them? Maybe an AC unit?
No,
I
I don't think it's that. I think it's maybe a bit of static feedback. I don't think it's a fan thing.
That's weird. Yeah, see, like I would quiet, right? Like a lot of these shapes over here, a lot of those bubbly highlights, right? So maybe to emphasize this one just a bit more. See, like leading even that into that, because this guy's pretty good. You could probably even, right, like with a guy like him, bring him more into silhouette and into shape. Like we don't really need to see a lot of the intricacies of him, even though he's like really close to us. But like just having him read as a shape, I think could go a long way. In fact, I'm just failing to
picturing him
Failing to
be like the heart of the piece. If I'm looking at the whole painting, he's probably the thing that's most likely to function as the center point. And my thought is maybe you could even bring him closer.
Yeah.
So it's a little larger.
I would use that guy, as a framing device.
As well, just while you're working on that, at the same time, my eyes really desiring, giving me a reason to look in the background. If you look at a lot of paintings by Michael Kutcher, what he'll very often do is have something in the foreground as a focal point and then something in the background as a focal point, so it pulls your eye into the background and kind of gives more purpose to it rather than just being an object. So having some way of highlighting or drawing attention to somebody way off in the distance and then to the foreground will really push that depth and create a connection between foreground and background elements.
Mm.
And we definitely need to give some kind of temperature contrast.
Yes.
The thing I keep wanting to do is add some subsurface scattering to the underbellies of those tarps. Have some of the light passing through those tarps could be really pretty.
I would lose
some warmth to the shot.
I would lose these rocks over here that they're just kind of, for me, adding more visual noise, and it just simplifying that can help focus the eye on this very complex element, right? This whole workhorse thing. So I'd push a lot of that in the back to focus on these. See, like this is negative shapes. And then you could really take, like, for example, everything beyond maybe like this guy, right? Like this whole area. Of course, we'll cut this guy out for now. And then even like this guy, keep him there. But like probably pushing a lot of that back and losing... I don't know, there's probably like 10 different ways to do this, but, just obscuring and losing. See, like, you know what I mean? I'm trying to just fade a lot of that into the background without, without going too far with it, just to enhance the depth. So see, I gotta blend a lot of that. So that way it keeps the focus on some of these guys, right? That's in the front. And like you guys said, and I 100% agree, like I would probably stick this guy with my awesome selection skills here.
Yep. Right? Unparalleled.
Just drop this guy like in the foreground in some way, and then that's a mess. We'll just leave it as that. And then like you said, really adding some of the light, right? Like coming through, like over here, for example, right? Like just what's it get? It gets usually pretty saturated and stuff up and under there. I don't know if there's not going to do that in a very clean and efficient way here, but you're just getting that light in some way, right? We could play with that. That would look really cool.
Nice.
And show that, and then right, it's all about these forms and these dimensions. Have the little guy in there. And then, it doesn't, a little bit more care to that effect, but, it just like a lot of subtleties like that could go a long way with it.
And I think another thing that's throwing me off about this piece is the temperature. I'm getting a little bit of the feeling of like white being the light and black being the shadow, as opposed to shifting between the light and shadow. And so I'm looking and I'm thinking that the light is warm. You've got all these like golden light streaks across the ground. And so if that's the case, you want to push those shadows like underneath this giant contraption into the blues. Or you want to go into a cool range to really make this feel like have more depth and feel less flat. And the color shifting will give you a lot more bang for your buck than just going darker.
And we'll end it on that. But this is a really fantastic and complex piece. And usually the more complex are, the more moving pieces there literally is. So it's easier to kind of to make. There's more places for error to slip through. But just the fact that you tackled something this immense is awesome. See, like even adding like a little bit of blue right into that range, just to and then even. You could even desaturate that a little bit. You could literally force in a little bit of color with color balance. There's a lot of ways, right, that can be handled. And then
the shadows and the color balance, you can cool them down.
Little tweaks under there, adding some light coming through the tents, adding maybe even more bounce light kind of coming underneath there. But yeah, this is great. I think it's a fantastic piece, definitely.
Very cool.
Ambitious. Right, Doggins. This is cool. I like the atmosphere you got in here, Doggin. And of course, you got this awesome nude woman that's just trying to take out this massive structure with an arrow. I don't know if I would believe that so much. So like a little bit of the, but I like that you have.
Yeah, like her low tech versus high tech type of thing.
Now, yeah, I love that theme. I don't know if this was the best way to do it, right?
Yeah. That big claw in the foreground should be a main focal point, grabbing the gems. And I would take that entire... I would imagine this being a camera. I would shift the entire camera over to the right to get that thing into frame.
Yeah, like this whole bit, Adam. We just take this and drop it. Maybe like right on that third, even, just to frame it a little more comfortably. Right? Drag that in. And then, just... And then create the depth.
Maybe we could even extend extend a little bit more over to the right to give us a little bit more.
Yep.
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. But yeah, this is like such an important action and feature to the image. You know, and that character shooting it is definitely like secondary, but it also, as much as I like it, it also does feel a little bit more forced and not as well thought through. Particularly since it's armor and it's a lot. What do you think, Jess?
I think that the perspective is off on the woman on the ground, because we're at this big structure, but then we feel like we're kind of got a bird's eye view of her, and it's creating this kind of like fish lens of perspective in the middle of it. And so I think that's one of the things that makes her feel out of place. Also, just that she's kind of just standing in this big empty spot. Like it doesn't feel like anything in the image is designed towards pushing our eye towards her or placing her into the scene, other than she's standing on the ground. So like, you want to design the shape so that they push the eye towards her. If she's the heart of the piece, if this is what the story is about, the other elements in the painting should be having, different directional lines and shapes that tell your eye this is the direction that it wants to go. Mm-hmm. And it'll make her feel less out of place and arbitrary.
Yeah. Also, I don't know what you guys think, but what do you think of maybe adding a couple of other people? Like, she's the head warrior, and there's a couple of other people, because it kind of has that indigenous, indigenous people that are being overrun by this massive tech beast thing.
Yeah, so I agree.
They're kind of an Avatar type of thing. It's a tribe of people trying to fight off this beast type of thing because they don't understand what it's about.
Yeah, a tribe of people's a lot more work, but I think that's exactly what it needs. More overlap, and then getting the contrast, of course, right on this crane, because you got to get that to read separately from the background, which is the next big kind of problem there.
Yeah, making it darker makes it feel more imposing too.
And then you could silhouette just a few more of those in the background. Okay, Jess, you go.
Oh, sure. I think another thing that's throwing me off about this piece is just materials. A lot of the materials feel samey. Like, the gems don't feel that much different than what the big structure is made out of. Her skin is made out of, what the ground is made out of. Like, it all kind of has that same, like, painted flatness, as opposed to feeling like distinct materials that react to light differently.
Yeah, the metal feels flat, for sure. That, like, it lacks the specularity, the highlights, the reflection. And it almost, for this area, you feel like you could see more rust, more dirt, more grime on it. A little bit more like that, I think, could definitely help push that as well. But it's the last arrow, so I like the naming, I like the theme. But yeah, I definitely think having more of the tribe, and maybe even her a little larger and in the frame a bit, could help that as well. But yeah, definitely a challenging piece.
You know what this needs too? Since we're in the desert, it's bright sun shining down, we're around midday, we definitely need to have some of that, just to kind of tie the colors in, have some of that yellow sand bounce on the undersides of the platforms, give us a bit of bounce light. It feels just a bit too blue on top, yellow on the bottom. I think that might help a bit too.
Yeah, and I agree with that, Adam. And I'd almost take like this whole side of it, right? If we're committing to this side, right? I think doing the lighting's almost like a little too passive, I think, for the type that this image demands. So I would definitely force a little more with the lighting to add a lot more depth and structure in as well. Even if it's like, okay, we got to darken this side, lighten that side, add a lot more bounce coming up into here. Yeah, structurally, not the strongest piece I've seen from Yudongin, but it's definitely one of the most challenging.
Yeah.
All right, Donnie.
Yes. Look at this. Totally different perspective than everybody else. I think that's points for that alone. And yeah, so.
What'd you guys
go
do?
for it.
Just, like so much thought put into like the shapes of the light coming into the painting and the way that the triangular shapes are breaking up the image. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, I'd say too. There's a couple of little tricks done with lighting that I love in art. It's kind of a bit of a little secret hack, or not a hack, but kind of a secret idea you can use to add a lot of dimension to your lighting and visual interest, is having objects that are partially in the light, like the cell phone, the picture frame. I love how the light crosses over, and even from a lighting perspective, Donnie did a really nice job of balancing light on dark and dark on light. Like if you look at the back of the chair, and then how the lighting opposes the lighting hitting the cell phone. So you get that visual contrast so you don't lose those forms, which is really very cleverly done. The
graphic
idea,
shapes.
Yeah, absolutely.
You gotta always think in graphic shapes. This is a great example of it, and I think why we all liked it.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the charm in the character. You can see he's a big softie. He's making a puppy castle. I think it adds that sympathetic aspect to his personality that makes him more relatable.
I think as well the temperature, the attention to like light and shadow. Like you got these beautiful orange lights and these, soft purpley shadows. A lot of nice atmosphere mood from that.
Yeah. It could be really cool to add a bit of dimension to this. Since we're a bit of a top-down view, I was thinking imagine that the camera, if you're thinking about like camera angles and stuff, imagine the camera being up on a shelf or something like that, or a bookshelf, something to help frame off the left side of the image, and kind of place us behind an object instead of us just looking directly at it. I don't know, maybe like a corner of a dresser or a fan, because it's a hot day, so maybe having some...
Yeah, it's a very tough shot given the angle is like standing at a person watching him do this in the room. Yeah, for sure. Maybe bringing in too, see, like you have this cool little gem, but I don't feel like it needs to feel a bit more important. Mm-hmm. Right? Like it's there, but it's not embracing what it could really be doing. So whatever, right? Yeah, whatever that case may be, like just bringing in a little more, to it, and then having that, just going through that,
and glowing,
and having that affect a lot as a secondary cool light source. Just grabbing in like all the little sides and stuff around it, even from the character.
Yeah, catching the side of his face. Nice.
Yeah, like it could add a lot of dimensions. You doing that, and then any other shape, kind of directly, I guess, affected by that. So I'm just doing this extremely quick and poor. But yeah, take a cooler version, right, of that, so you can start bringing in a lot more other subtle colors over the forms. What, I accidentally grabbed the dissolve mode, right? But you can find and describe, right, a lot of these cool features, and then mix, blend, and push, and it'll be a nice little contrast and accent, right, for the image. Could really help it. But yeah, great job. You guys want to add anything else? It's well done.
No, I really love how he's used that triangular shape on the table. I can't remember what they're called, but but I'm wondering if the top left corner, maybe having something subtle coming down in that left corner, might be what it needs. Kind of what you guys are talking about, like
it needs something.
The eye from going off of the side of the canvas there.
Yeah. I feel maybe a little bit of I would imagine maybe a bit of a light, just a bit of a fill, just to add some ambiance over on the left, coming in from the left side of the image, catching off the other, like the dark side of the little puppy thing he's creating. Yeah, just to add a little bit of a color shift. It just needs a little, like, just to separate that too from the wall. Yeah. Like really, I got a weird airbrush here. But yeah, basically a little something right up in there. I'd say the biggest thing, if I were to continue to really work on this, the materials are all exactly the kind of same, which they're all like
very kind of flat and like nondescript, I would add more. Personally, I'd add more material cues. You know, chair, table, wood, box. It's all interchangeable at that stage. So that's what I would continue to develop it.
Yeah, really lovely.
All right, Seal. I think we all loved your idea here. Like, this thing is very, very visually interesting. I think it definitely gets a little flat in the value and color range on a lot of things. I don't know if there's a specific answer for it, but I am drawn to the creativity and you know, some of that the craftsmanship, the artistry really put into this.
You also respected the narrative the most out of every. Like, we can see it's a moving fortress with gems in it, right? Which kind of hits all of the. It checks off all the things there that some people kind of let certain ideas go and focus it more on the others, but you really challenge yourself to fulfill that narrative. So really nicely done.
Yes.
There's something perspective-wise that's as it's coming around the bend. It feels like there's something off in terms of the perspective.
Like right
That
here.
leg coming in. Well, the mountain on the left that's overlapping it. It feels like there's a bit of a perspective weirdness going on. Like that leg's pointing in the. I would have that leg actually go in the other direction.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like it feels forced in that bend back.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
It'd be too.
I think also is I kind of get the impression we're looking down slightly at the landscape, but we're looking up slightly at the picture. Which, if it's on scale with the mountain, if we're looking slightly down, then we would still be looking slightly down on the fortress.
Yeah.
The way that all the lines are curving up, is like we're looking up at it.
Yeah. Which means its butt would actually pass through the ground if that was the case, kind of like a la Asmodan thing.
Yeah, I was just trying to separate like I said, there was a flatness problem, and I think a lot of that can be fixed by starting to introduce form and cast shadows to create families, right? Distinct families of light and shadow, right? Which it really is lacking, and I think it could add a whole other, you know, dimension, you know, to the piece, like bringing in a lot of this fill light from the atmosphere, you know, into the shadow. You know,
yeah,
it could just make it so much more
particularly
lively.
since it's so far away. Yeah, you should.
Yeah,
definitely get
and
to
that can help sell the scale. I think for me, the clouds are too visually noisy and like they're kind of like giant bubbles everywhere, and that for me just comes off as distracting. Like, it's not adding anything right to that piece. So I would find a way to calm those down. You guys have anything ahead at this stage? But yeah, I would just simplify like a lot of this.
I'd say, yeah, just in terms of overall form and rendering, just to be careful not to put bold, thick lines separating all of the different facets of its design. Try to unify it a little bit more, because it really comes across as having a bold cartoon line separation between all of his architecture, and I kind of try to find a way to unify that a little bit more by taking away some of those dark intersections.
Yeah, I agree.
I also just find that the very straight line of the mountain going off the page to be a bit distracting. I would suggest maybe trying to design the ridge of that mountain in a more interesting shape, so it doesn't just feel like a big triangle on side painting.
Yeah, you could
like
take
the
it.
trees. You could actually do the tree kind of something to sculpt.
Just make the guy even taller there. You know, like there's a lot of ways you could start and then bring out some distinguishable, you know, trees and stuff up there. And then I'd lower maybe that side, because see, right now they're very even, and it is really kind of squashing things right quite a bit. So right, if you take a lot of that, you'll actually lower it a good deal, right, like this. And then I like all the little birds and stuff. That's a nice touch. Right, and then just kind of getting a lot of that to blend. Oh, there we go. Go around the gun, the cannon. Have the clouds be a little more subtle. I think that could add a lot, you know, to the piece. Once you just tighten it up, simplify, push the lighting, you'd have a really good piece. Also, for me, it's begging to be expanded this way. Like, you have a almost square composition. The head is butting right up against the edge here, which is like usually something most people try to avoid. I'd simply expand it a little more like that. It'll balance everything out a lot better.
I was also thinking I'd like to see something break the top edge of the painting. So like maybe even to have like some larger pieces of this monstrosity, kind of like a long skinny shape to go up and break up the top edge of the
painting. That could. For sure. Alright, type Proton.
Yes. Points for creativity and design. Look at that.
Yeah, I like the use of color and structure in this for sure.
There's kind of a consistent fisheye. Now, here's a little tip for fisheye for a warped, what's called barrel distortion. You kind of have that curve to it, right? The Earth should also curve. You have everything else is distorted in a nice consistent way. But the ground is very straight. Yep. I would barrel that even more to play into the whole.
Yeah, style. I was thinking kind of like that, right? Like go with that curve just a bit more. Like do a little more wrapping and warping.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is going to be a delicate thing, but right, like just kind of nudging all that a little bit further.
Yeah.
Bullying it, just like a little bit. I think a lot of the midground's almost like too blue with like little separation. I'd want to see like, okay, right, for example, if you have all this orange getting this direct light, then a lot of that's going to bounce up and affect the shadows in here.
Yeah.
It's like a little too uniform in part, and even though a lot of the base color ideas work really well, it's also very flat in a lot of areas for the fairly similar reasons. So like like all of this, you could take that, you could add a lot of depth, to it. I darken it up first and then go in, see like on a shape like that, bring the warm, like orange and blue, what's in the middle, yellow and green. I'd bring yellow and greens into that wheel to kind of harmonize everything together and use it as like that transition sort of color to really to tie a lot of things together and add a lot of color depth right into the image. So like particularly near the bottom, right near the ground, you'd see like a lot more of that. And if that's really orange, you could even force a little bit more in here and there, and then feather it off to that base blue that's already up there. Could add a lot more to it.
I think that they're getting a lot of the local color of like the sky is blue, the stones are blue, the foliage and the grass is orange, and they're not really thinking again about the temperature variation of light and shadow. And so when you think about, balancing these oranges and blues, choosing which color your light is going to be, which it looks like a very blue, cool light, then the places on the leaves and the grass that are getting the most light will actually get less saturated and less gold and show more of that cool light. And then if they go into the shadows, you'll see more of the saturation and orange colors.
Yeah, bringing a lot of the trees on the side, I like their shapes, but I think with the lighting they come off, as too flat. Like we should be seeing, more like part of the top forms, right, as it wraps around, and then underneath them, and then even light, in parts of it anyway, which I'll do very bluntly with this, but like, right, we'd see the light, the light, because it's kind of coming from that direction, you'd start to see it, right, really kind of punch through part of those shapes and forms. Again, it's a very blunt way of doing it here, but yeah, I'd see a little bit more of that. And then I'd get a little bit more depth in the grass, right, Jesse? You know a thing or two about painting grass. This ends up coming off as really rough, unfinished, and it doesn't have that depth yet.
And another thing to think about is, like, when you're thinking about the temperature difference of light and shadow, think about what color the atmosphere is. Like, what the space of air that's, like, occupying this painting, what color is it? And I'm kind of getting the impression it's this very cool, crisp blue. And so when you have that, whatever color the atmosphere and the light is, those are going to be your richest colors, your truest colors, because they're competing with that color of the atmosphere in the way that like the opposite color would be fighting to get through all of that blue light.
Look at that. That's a nice.
Yeah, I really want to frame that dark shape too against something a little bit more visually interesting that thematically ties it into this scene. Because again, at the horizon here, there's a lot of flat blue color, and I would want to do something a bit more that's also not distracting, right? Something like that, just to kind of help frame it just a little bit. You know, bring it into like this little clearing. See, you're doing it over there, but then you just stop. So this is like a lot of white on white, and that isn't interesting. So you got to think about those relationships.
So it's probably one of the most important fixes you're doing right now. You got to get some contrast, the blue on blue.
Yep. A little bit of yellow, orange. What brush? Oh my god, multiply. I'm like, why is this?
Multiply.
Yeah, I was like, why is this acting?
It does it so it just switches
funny.
modes on me. I don't know what
I forgot to change it back. I think it's definitely a user error. Yeah, there we go. And I need to get a little bit more. You gotta settle the depth on these. I know I should push a little more orange and stuff, but you got to separate it from the foreground too. So that little bit of tweaking will help, a lot of that as well. But yeah, really cool PC. Like this character for being in the foreground is very flat looking with the color depth. Yeah. Like we should really be seeing a lot of the subtlety and stuff going on in there, which I'm not going to get into now, but it definitely needs more bounce light coming up underneath, more fill light.
I was gonna say as well as like that main character in the foreground, like I just kind of want to see it be a little more interesting because it's like such an important note in the painting that like to add some more detail, some texture, take the time to like elaborate on the costume and really finesse it, would go a long way.
Guys, I really like the selection we came up with this month. Every piece is so drastically different, and that's a huge part that some people may not understand. We're not going to pick the same 10 images, even if they're all really good, but if they all have the same exact problem, we are trying to get some variety in here.
Yeah.
This is nice. I love the muted palette. I love it. I love the subtlety here. Very, very amazing sense of control when it comes to lighting and form in that regard, and fantastic rendering up here with the character. I'd almost say I'd push that further in, but
yeah, there's part of me that wants to see that character become a little more visible. I love the perspective, I love the subtlety of it, but when you're not like up on top of it, that character almost gets lost, and such a cool character.
Yeah, you know what? I'd even extend. I don't even take that, but like, literally taking this whole bit of it, bringing it at least that far in, have the end, right, the end of the kind of shoot right through. What the heck was that? Oh, a giant, right? Just shoot kind of right through the character in a way that doesn't make a bad tangent. Could, pulled off well, look really, really nice.
I'd also add a little, just to pop the silhouette, add a little bit of an atmosphere, like maybe some humid mist or something to pop the character.
Right down here, Adam. Yeah. I got your back. Got the mist.
With your select skills.
Right, get that.
You should start your own like course online of how to select.
You used. Oh gosh, that I'm gonna do that. At next April Fool's Day, someone remind me. I'll try to make it.
You have to do that.
I'll try to make it feel like such a legit thing.
We should also do like this mini documentary. Tyler. I mean, you're known for your artistic skills, but you've really pioneered the whole selection culture. Yeah. I'd like to know a little bit more about that.
As long as I'll hire you to narrate it. As long as you can keep that accent going throughout it.
Oh, you got it.
I can't find my like my spaz brush, but it needs like some foam, crashing with the. This is not the right brush for that, but it would also look good for the water. Right, and the waves and stuff. I almost swore, but I need.
My eyes are really craving right now too. Way up at the top of that cast, a beautiful silhouette up at the top, and to have a bit of maybe that bluish, violety glow of some skylight kind of pushing through the clouds to help those rooftops read a little bit better.
Yep, these gotta pop. We're on the same page with this one, Adam.
Yeah.
And I'm actually finding like the God rays coming in from the corners to be a little distracting. There's so many beautiful subtle areas of the painting, and the God rays feel like they're like at like 110%.
People who show up to the weekly hangout know I always say 9 out of 10 God rays and images are too overdone.
Yep.
It's a delicate thing to kind of balance. It's just funny how just like a little bit more of that blue. Heck, you could toss in a little purple to cap it off. Heck, though, I'm a big fan of the green. Let's put a little green in that sky too.
Nice.
Let's use every neutral there is. A little more yellow. Yeah, just get a little bit of that just to poke through the dark sky, and that'll really help it. Like, this is an awesome piece. But yeah, because you have all of this going on, I feel like a lot of this should be so much more subtle. Like, at least having like a cloud break, seeing some more.
Yeah.
You know,
having some of that God ray light actually maybe catching off of some of the clouds a little bit brighter to give the clouds a little bit more dimension where it's passing through. Yeah. Ooh.
It's like a lot more, like a pattern, like a whole visual pattern that takes place, you know, throughout the entire image, and not just forced at that one very sharp angle.
Yeah.
That's where you want to have some birds, some silhouetted birds against that godlight, and then have a couple of birds that are in the dark catching the light. Whenever I do birds in the background, I like to do light on dark, dark on light to kind of give you a bit of visual variety there.
Yeah,
it breaks up spaces nicely.
I'm still forcing this like a little too much. Yeah, really, like some of this light should be coming from like out of frame, and that's part of the the trickiness, right, of this. It's trying to balance all of that. But yeah, that's not, I don't consider that an end solution. That definitely needs a little bit more revisiting. But this is a great piece, and little tweaks will take this a lot further. All right, so Wonko. This is cool. All right, so again, this really fills out the thematic properties of this, but this has a lot of, for me, it has a lot of fundamental design problems that hold the idea back. Like, we have this image is the way it's set up here. You're essentially telling the audience that it's primarily about the sky, and we see this case every month, right? Like 70 to 60% of your image is the sky. You have nothing visually interesting in it at all, right? Everything that's worthwhile in your scene is happening down below.
Yep.
And that's what it's about. So you have a lot of options. I wouldn't adjust. I wouldn't say you have to recrop this, but I would say take your subject matter and, you know, put it into the frame.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even show how tall it is by not having the top. And then, of course, you can add a lot more depth in regards to the shape and the creature itself, you know, by adding a lot more, you know, just imagine all the different shapes and forms, right? You can add in, coming in and over to there. You know, this is coming out to there, and then you could even push, see, I'd push a lot of that down. I'm doing this very, very absurdly, but because I want to see a little bit more of that face on the water, you know, and then bring the ship maybe in a little more like that. I don't know if you'd have to overlap it. It's a tricky composition. I definitely would recommend going back and doing a lot of pre-comps, you know, just doing thumbnail designs to find the best possible way to express this idea, because it definitely seems like it's a victim of you committing too early and just jumping on board the idea without best kind of exploring it.
And I think too is like a lot of it is like kind of going with like the first impression, like symbolic representation of like the head on the water, and you just kind of went with like the profile flat bottom. What if you actually like design the image around the head turning towards the viewer, so you get like the cool shape of like the snout coming forward, creating like a little arc island.
No, that's a brilliant idea.
I just realized that was a creature. I just saw the eye. When you said that, I'm like, what head are you talking about? And
Adam,
like,
I
just noticed the eyeball. Okay.
I think that's a testament to the huge design flaws in it. That. I mean, I thought it was fairly obvious for me, but like, yeah, I mean, that head should probably be turned and kind of coming around. Look up some snakes, look up some turtles, and, you know, have it move the yellow boat like right here, you know, and then really frame that awesome lighting that, you know, the scene can, like, really, we want to feel the lighting hit the parts of the creature where it's, you know, important.
Yeah.
And then you can design, you know, continue to design the fortress and stuff in various aspects at a lot of depth. And then whatever space is left, think about how, you know, if adding any kind of sky can supplement the movement and flow into the scene.
And I think another thing that we've noticed in a few pieces is just leaving the top half of the picture empty and not having things break up. And sometimes it happens on the bottom of the canvas, but sometimes it happens on the top of the canvas. And you generally want something breaking up the edges of the painting. You want lines leading into the image from the top and the bottom, and finding shapes to break up the edges of the canvas will go a long way towards moving the eye through the piece, instead of like before where you just have the open blue, like the entire top edge of the painting. Yeah, because it stops the eye there, and it makes area like become a dead area, and you don't get any interesting negative space when you do that as well.
Yep.
I'm also too lazy to switch brushes at this point, so I'm just kind of just doing some quick things. But like even showing the water, you know, with the transparency kind of coming and flowing over the creature, using that movement, you know, in the piece. I mean, I really need to add the shadow, you know, underneath all of that, you know, there and stuff. But yeah, there's a great idea here, but any good idea that's really worthwhile deserves a lot of planning before jumping to an execution on, like, just following it through.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, 3D Berserk. The name. This has got a good setup. Very realistic lighting. Nice sense of scale. There's not a lot of problems with it. So I think our approach with this would be like, what could we add, you know, to give it more of an impact, right? Mm-hmm. What could we... And I think what were we thinking? We were thinking, like, what if we added the top of the crystals really, like, poking out of here? Because, like, this is all fairly regular. I mean, we can't see a lot that's going on because it's silhouette-based. But what if you started to hint, right? And all these little crevices and stuff, right? Parts of these massive crystals that really otherworldly sort of, you know, aspects to it.
Yep.
And then you could show more of those, of course.
Oh, yeah, look at that.
Right down there.
Big, huge crystals, yeah.
So it's like, hey, can Tyler draw a crystal in 4 seconds? Probably not, but there. Power.
Not bad.
Power is ours.
We very often in illustration you can learn a lot from photography. I mess around with that stuff on the side, and for you look at in a situation like this, you have purely the entire narrative. Everything about the scene is entirely silhouetted, and you can actually bring in light to illuminate, add a little bit of dimension in the shadowed area, the way a photographer would using a flash. There's a reason why photographers use a flash outside. So you have that key silhouetted light, that what's called a backlight from the sunset. But then you can imagine that somebody set off a flash that adds some fill into the shadowed area just to bring out a little bit of stuff in it, so it's not entirely flat and black. And that's how it's done in real life. And when you can mimic what a photographer would do, or a cinematographer, when you mimic that, our eye is familiar with that kind of lighting, so we don't read it as being weird. We kind of accept it because we've seen it in films and photography. So a little trick there.
Yeah, definitely. Like, just to show, like, you just need like a little bit of light, right? Yep. Like on the back of there. I think my store brand way of fixing this right now is just going to be a copy paste and then like, you know, a levels adjustment. But yeah, you'd want to do that, you know, quite a bit more carefully, and then think about color, you know, relationship. But it needs, I'd say, a little bit something to make it look a little more dimensional.
Yep.
You know, it'll look really, really good. I think a little more careful attention to a lot of the textures. Like, if you check out the art that they just put out, because this is more realistic, right, from The Last of Us 2, which Adam just reviewed, I think, this week, right? There's a lot of... This would be like kind of a mock-up for a finished production image. So that means nailing the shapes and the silhouettes of the trees in the background, really capturing the mud and the reflection of everything down here a little bit more carefully. But like structurally though, this is actually a really solid image. You there might be a point to argue that, like, okay, you could do a nice graphic shape, you know, up there with the sky, and, you know, add a little bit more drama and impact by making a fairly I'm gonna just grab this on multiply, but just like adding just adding like a little bit more. I try to avoid the crystal. I didn't want to overpaint that, but, you know, just like a little bit more of a shape back there with some of the clouds, which I think you had recently in one of your pieces, Jess, but it, you know, it'll add a little bit more interest and drama to the scene too.
It almost looks like rain clouds the way you're doing it with the blend tool.
Yeah, and I gotta fix this. This is super budget, but yeah, the for me right now, it's the ground and like the trees that are the most offensive, aside from adding in the details in here and stuff that it needs. But it's a really cool piece, and I think it's very close. You know, you just got to commit and go all the way with fine tuning all the little pieces.
Yeah, it just needs a little push, but I think it's close.
Who wants to start us off with Claire Bear?
Jessica, you got to start us off. She was smitten by this piece.
I thought it had just much personality and character to it, and I really loved like just the really consistent use of mark making, the way that the shapes and the different ways that the brushes were used, all really consistent. Yeah. I think the value structure was kind of the thing that was the most.
Working on it now.
Structure per se, like the shapes are really fun. Where the lights and darks are is really nice, but it just all of the lights feel just kind of missing. They all feel kind of gray and dull, and there's no points where the light actually feels vibrant and light. And yeah. I think that it's such a charming piece. Like there's so much whimsical. It's almost it's a joyful piece.
Yeah.
And the light kind of undersells that.
I think you should, Claire Bear, you should look at some of Justin Gerard's illustrative work. Yeah. I think there's a lot of common, right, Jess? Wouldn't you agree? There's a lot of similar traits to it, but he's got a mastery over some of the things that this piece is kind of lacking. All right, so put that there. And then, like Adam said in the previous piece, you can invent the hell out of lighting if it really pushes and escalates your image. So I'm going to very brutally do this with color dodge here just to make a point, but like imagine the glow of light, just really helping your character, at least some of the key parts of it. So again, I would really select the distinguishable specific shapes that this light up here probably should be hitting. And really, oh come on, see, like this is all in shadow right from the shell. So right, it's very hard, and then it's also has areas that are very soft. It's soft shadow, form shadow, and I'd also wouldn't crop. That's the biggest thing for me is just the drawing for that. Like you don't want to just lose the nose of your creature as victim to the top there. It's like a huge missed opportunity on a composition level. But then again, right, you could kind of poke out, some more of the lighting, that are hitting a lot of those structures, and I'd leave the ground in shadow. I think that works perfectly great in shadow. What do you guys have to add? I've been running my mouth.
That pretty much summarizes it for me. Yeah, just putting a little bit of that. Finding it. Imagine there's something off the side. A friend of mine, again talking photography. He did a picture. He took a picture of a family at sunset sitting at a dock. And I looked at the picture and I said, wow, that's really cool. There was this red light shining right down the dock and hitting off the left side of them. And I said, where did you get that red light from? Because this is real life. And he goes, clever. He says, you noticed that? There was a red cottage just outside the frame that was bouncing the sunset back into the shot. So instead of having that building in it to make it more of a literal piece, he cropped it out. So it just functioned as a fill.
A light
this
source.
Is real life. This isn't even a painting. So you can think about ways you can bounce light into a scene that might not be from a visible light source, right?
You know what it's
gives
called?
You a lot of opportunity to flesh things out.
Art directing reality. Just taking reality and shifting it and taking what you need from it, leaving what you don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna hit pause and then we're gonna. So we're back. These are we just did our picks, our editor's sort of picks. So I went with Juanape's here. I think this has got a very high ceiling potential once you get in there and you make your adjustments, you balance your colors and stuff. And I love the craftsmanship and the design sensibilities you brought to this. You sold me. Adam, you want to go?
Yeah, I love the unique approach, the beautiful approach to lighting, the character and visual, the character development and the visual storytelling in this piece by Donnie is just gorgeous. It really stands out for me. So well done.
And Jess,
yeah,
I guess
I love all three of these, but this one just stood out to me. It's just so elegant and beautiful. I love the unexpected perspective and just the whimsical quality of this figure. It's so understated but poignant. I just think it's just a beautiful design and a beautiful piece. I think this would make a gorgeous cover illustration for a book. I'd pick that book up in a heartbeat. So.
You know what I like about it too? It's like a composition that I probably would never go with personally, and it's like, I wish I thought of it now because it's just so clever and it really sells the verticality extremely well. Yeah. And Adam, I love with your pick how it's so visually different from your own personal work. And it's like I usually do that type of work and you usually do that type of work, but we kind of pick the opposite. So I just kind of like how that worked out.
Yeah, Yeah, they all have equal strengths, but such completely different minds. I love all three. Honestly, I love all three.
Thank you
But
guys for
yeah,
helping me out. And all right, so now I'm going to go through the rest of the entries, give my 2 cents on that, and we'll move forward. So basically, I'm going to open these up in sets because there is so many, and I can kind of group and give the same generalized sort of feedback on them. Now, if you're in this category here, sorry, again, we really didn't choose yours, but they're still a little too either ambiguous or just too unfinished for what we're really looking for and for what we could offer the rest of the entries in regards to feedback to really push them. So like for example here, right, Ravika, you have some good structure going on there, but most of the image, it's like I don't know what's going on. I don't know what the story is there. I don't know if that's ice, I don't know if that's sand, I don't know if it's quarry, I don't know if it's stuck, I don't see any gems. It's just a little too, it's not there yet. Let's leave it at that. Be a little more specific and have it be a little more focused, and I think that'll help a lot. Rittenker. Now this is, again, a really solid idea, but it's still like it too early on in the overall process, too unfinished looking. You just got to tighten it up. You got to keep practicing, spend more time, referencing the anatomy, working on the composition. But it's very creative, and I think it's wonderful for that. Definitely, it needs a little more sense of lighting, and something maybe up in the composition up here to help kind of focus things. So yeah, I don't know if the character works there yet. Maybe the hand itself needs to be pivoted with a bit more of the elbow, and this needs to be clear. This general spacing in the scene needs a lot more, and don't forget to do the proper amount of research and reference too. Not just grab some images that are kind of like it, but you'll need references on skies, forests, rocks, everything like this. Now, this is seemingly clearly like a much different style than what I'm used to, and I don't want to tell you that this is wrong, but like as an illustration that would kind of work in this sort of challenge, it needs a lot more structure. This is so chaotic, I just don't know what to look at, and a large part of that is because there's literally no control in organization of the shapes and values, which is always the first thing I look at. So see, when you desaturate it like this, I can't tell at all what's going on, and that's the problem. It lacks composition, it lacks structure, it lacks a lot of that focus. You want to just think of things as clearly defined shapes of then lights and value, and then work on what you want to really have the viewer focus on. Cashew, the same, not quite in the same way, because like I can see that there's like a person here, but other than that, I don't know what's happening here. This is still way too muddy. It's way too uncontrolled. It just, we need some finished stuff, for this challenge to really kind of critique and to help everybody else. Now, by comparison, Scarlet Force, right? This is a lot cleaner, right? Definitely compared to these two, which is good. So these two, with Galdersons, right? And then Cashews, clean yours up, and then it can get to this level. And then once it's at Scarlet's level, then you can have a little bit deeper of a conversation of what really is holding this back. Well, it is kind of a bit about the materials. The design itself, it feels a little bit of a miss overall. Like we can see some joints, we can't see all of them. I still think having a little bit more tonal control and separation between the various pieces and components, as well, it needs a lot of work in the color and light department. The lighting is very flat. There's still a lot of very loose and kind of chaotic brushwork, going on, in the background that needs refinement. But for me, it's largely the color, and the design itself still needs, a bit of work. Like I can't tell back here if these are mountains, if these are clouds, if this is another one of these anatomical kind of beasts. It's still like, it needs a little bit of work to kind of really focus in. And these need to kind of get to there. So like this one, right, like with Galdersons, like, okay, I can kind of see it's on a crab and stuff, but everything is kind of almost too hard shaped. So if you're focusing on hard shapes here for your main subject matter, it'd probably do you a bit better to kind of soften some of the lighting and some of the shapes, for example, in the background. Now usually it's going to be a little bit darker for the most part up top. You'd want to see a little bit more of that horizon. You need to look at loads of references of stormy seas, because this definitely looks made up and unreferenced. Like this lighting on it, the way it's all just structured, it feels too forced, and it, again, not even the lighting itself is entirely consistent. Like, you know, that shape should be in shadow. If the light's hitting here, you're gonna see, because the water's transparent, you're gonna see the light visible through part of these waves and stuff. You know, why is the ship, if this is a huge element, why is it way off here falling out of the composition? It's just, and then this is compositionally here. So that, I don't know, from a narrative perspective, it should be from maybe a person on the ship deck. Maybe the ship should be in the frame with the creature looming vastly, kind of like this, if this was the ship here and this was the big crab, and then, you know, applying all the attention to color, light. So yeah, it just kind of falters in too many categories for it to work. Alright, now in this set, any of these really could have been chosen. I mean, they're all excellent, and I genuinely love all of these. I love the ideas, I love the shapes, and some of them are just brilliantly executed. But of course, due to the selection process, it's tough, and we just can't fit everybody's in. So I just want to go through each of these. Now, Cassandra here, this is awesome. I genuinely love this idea, this setup. I think there's definitely a brush problem going on. Like, things are either overworked or they're underworked, or there's edge problems, or there's too much digital ghosting with how you're applying your mark making. You can see a lot of that up in the castle, a lot of that in the legs, definitely in the foreground. It's, you know what I mean? Like, it's all just too blurry. And then the brush work with the clouds in the sky, it's just kind of going everywhere. You got to control it, focus it a lot more. Your illustration is going to have a lot more impact, because the idea is beautiful, and you know, a lot of the rendering is stunning as well. It just needs a lot more refinement. Zelia, right? Again, excellent attention to detail, excellent world building, but when you really take the value out of this, it's very flat, and the color and lighting itself is flat in itself. But see, it's hard to figure out really what to focus on in this picture. You have like a little character moment, for example, in the corner here. You got this guy doing his thing, you got these guys over here, you got this going on. Like, I would say for you to try to focus what the main point of the picture is, whether it is any of those pieces, you know, that I just mentioned, and design the picture around that fully, so that the eye unquestionably looks at what the most important thing is first. So yeah, from the technical side, a lot of the shadowing is extremely black, extremely flat. Shadows is where colors are going to sing. They're going to pop. Even on something like an overcast day, kind of like this. So yeah, it needs a little bit of work of the coloring and focusing on the composition, but excellent detail. Almost to a fault, because there's too many unimportant things detailed, and again, it's not driving where we really want to look at. Istrander, this is great. I mean, excellent sense of scale, excellent perspective. I still think, you know, it's kind of a bit more in that draft form, even though I love most of this setup here. It's really fantastic, but again, the roof and texturing in there largely looks unfinished. Some of the detail work in the highlights, which is, you know, what you want to focus on and imply, right, just as you did in the shadows, which is great. But that means in the areas in the light, you're going to have to sharpen everything. You're going to have to be a little bit more crisp at a lot of those details. And again, the lighting in this, even for this time of day, it is a bit flat. And it's a tough thing to get right. And that part's going to take practice. So definitely revisit this down the line. Revisit this idea, revisit this composition, once you really know how to push color, light, atmosphere, and depth. a little bit more. A lot of the shapes on the background are overworked and overly busy. I think they're just kind of making things a little bit more cumbersome than they need to be. The brushwork in here is pretty sloppy. You're going to want to fix that. But yeah, like, you have a good base here, but it probably needs another 12 hours minimum of refinement, of cleanup, and pushing the various aspects to probably get it to the level you want. Chris and Tina, right? I probably got everybody's names wrong, and I apologize. This has got great, stylization. It's got nice sharp edges, almost everywhere, to the point where, like I mentioned previously, if you're gonna go super sharp and crisp edges, in the what's it called? Most of this foreground and midground, I'd probably recommend going with a bit softer, more implied sky, just so that they're not competing, as heavily. Edges are all part of design and brushwork, so even if you're going to go with like a sharper edge on the top of your clouds, try going something a bit softer on the bottom. It needs that balance to really kind of pop and sing. So see, like, if you're doing sharper shapes in the light and on top of your landscapes, soften some of the ones in the shadow in the water. Not every shape, but some of them. Where the light kind of dissipates and fades off. It needs that balance. And that'll really help the viewer's eye focus in. Now, the perspective in this is all over the place. And I didn't initially see at all that you have a head right here on this creature. Like, there's nothing separating this from any of that. And you're going to need to find a way to do that with light and value structure to make that pop, to make that stand out a bit more. But overall, the design itself I actually like quite a bit. Same with you, Cypher. I think, again, the core idea here is absolutely fantastic. I think you're doing a lot of research and reference. You're doing that a lot of the right way. It's kind of like it's the camera shot. I think if you were down low on the ground a bit more, like the 3D Berserker piece, like Wanape's here, I think having one of these camera angles selling this would be a lot more effective. So for me, the shot design is flat. The colors, they're still a bit flat. Like, again, we can't really feel the atmosphere and the light kind of going through in and around this piece. It's a little too blocky in a lot of places. I do like the glowing bits from the ice and stuff, but it needs a little bit more refinement in that regard. But I love the design of your mechanical stronghold and structure there. I think that's fantastic. And once your rendering and painting ability starts to go up, your ideas are really going to stand out. Same with you, Edmonds. Like, this is really beautiful. You have great design, with the structure, with the overall shapes, and the lighting is actually really fantastic. This easily could have just, got chosen like any of them. It kind of just slipped under, and not for any, specific purpose, but it just happens sometimes. So I apologize for that, but this is really fantastic. I think popping, some of, like, if the direct light is hitting some of these shapes here, I think we could pop those, just a little bit more. You get a little more red on there, and stuff like that. Something a little bit more for human scale. I know we could see the railing, but maybe on the ground. Maybe it's like a tree line. Maybe it's underneath harvesting, some of those crystals in and around there that's here. I think a little bit more focus. It's also, I would probably show, like a crane, or something kind of coming up, like over here, and that it's actually harvesting something, going on in here. Some of the coloring is a little dull in that regard, but just because it's generally facing out, I'd have the action coming back into the frame. All right? Now, here are the rest of them, and for whatever reason, I'd put them in the tier, behind the last batch. But for whatever reason, they just didn't resonate, with each of us. Because we were going around, right, and we just didn't pick them because they just weren't, kind of jumping out at us. So, but there's still, with that said, plenty of fantastic ideas here, lots of great world building, and of course a genuine sense of creativity here. So like, right, with Egg Weirdo, right, like this is really cool. That's super creative. It's reading fairly well too. I still think the lighting needs to do a little bit more, and that seems to be the common thing that I'm seeing the most most frequently, is like pretty good ideas, but they're getting destroyed or held back rather, right, by the lighting. And some of that has to do with values, some of that not. It's just like, I don't know, here you have a nice simple dynamic wedge shape, but like a lot of that, I don't know, in the foreground and everywhere else, I think it's just like everything's super bright, and kind of saturated. Like I would have preferred, like, since all of this is basically reading as one shape, when we valued it, I would like to see a consistent sort of light. Like here I can't tell what direction the lighting's from, and that kind of like, it just doesn't sit well with me. So commit on a light direction and really sculpt out the scene so that it'll reflect that. And I get this is an overcast scene in regards to the lighting as well, but there's ways, to make overcast scene really badass and dynamic. Alright, see guys, I had to take a minute because there's a lot of overcast scenes here and everyone's kind of just flattening them out. Like, look at this concept here by Kang Lee, right? Like, it's still a very nice dynamic use of neutrals and lighting, even when, using a fairly typically reserved sort of lighting palette. It's got good structure, good sense of atmosphere and lighting, and that's honestly just what, like, a lot of them are just not doing well enough. Even something like this, right? Very similar sort of aesthetic, but there's just enough of that subtle range, and of course the lighting and the brushwork are kind of piecing a lot of it together. That's what I feel like when I see, right, like something like this one too. It's just missing, right? I can't get both apparently. Right? It's just a little too flat. The brushwork's a little bit too, inconsistent. A little bit too much of a tangent here, and we can't feel enough of the subtle use of lighting in there. Even though a lot of the ideas itself here are actually really fantastic. But thank you for submitting, Waldo. Now, Eric, how you doing, Eric? Really cool idea. Like, I think this is on point, conceptually, with some of the best ideas. Sorry, I don't know where I'm looking. I got cameras all over the place. It's this one. And I usually don't even have it on for this part. But yeah, conceptually this is on point. This is really good. I think you need to do a few more design drawing breakdowns. Like, I get it, we're getting to the illustration, but I do think you'd benefit from that level of exploration. Again, that one Abe's doing here. Like, really get into the hows and the whys of how this works. And then getting into showcasing some of the actions going on. So for me, the weird parts with this is kind of like this flowery sort of canisters or cylinders there. It's really hard to tell what it's made out of and why it's made out of that, for example. The other thing is I think these just feel too small. So like maybe this feels too big without really getting enough of that atmosphere in it. So I don't know. Maybe for me I would have made the canyon itself, a bit taller, like over there. So like this is one side of the canyon, this is another side, all over there. Overlap all of that with atmosphere, and then make all these buildings, not that small. Like it's just too much of a disconnect, and so the scale for me just isn't there yet for that. Hey Vlad, I thought this is a cool idea. For me, it's a very weird idea. Again, I think the brushwork is too soft, and it kind of lacks the control for like a lot of what we look for. So see, where light's gonna hit on something like this, right? Like that should have an edge. And not even like the way I'm doing it there with like linear dodge. That's overkill. But it should have a nice sharp sort of firm, edge. Minimally kind of like that. Blow it out It's all white, light, and yellow. And give it that hard edge and then transition it softly into the shadow. This is a huge edge control problem, and the colors are almost a little too chaotic for its own good. But thank you, for submitting this, Vlad. Keep at it. Again, I think a little bit of the scale gets off here in regards to these figures to these figures. I think all these would be a little bit better, just decreasing the actual distance a little bit, and then maybe doing a bit more with these. Like, it's hard to see what the relationship are between, what the bones are, what the creature itself is. I think maybe I think this needs to get redesigned, if I'm being honest. Like, it just on 2 wheels. Needs a bit more of a back, more wooden structures built onto that. So I think it needs a little more on the design board. This is kind of similar, Rose. It's just, I think the cinematic shot design of it's lacking. See, like, you have some references here like this. Like, see, that's a nice kind of cinematic take on it. You can feel the lighting, you can see the shapes, and it's very tonally consistent. This got airbrushed to death. If I'm just being straightforward with it, there's no hard edges. A lot of it gets lost. The shot itself, it lacks a little bit of that perspective and that scale we want, and it's hard to tell with this cookie. I don't know what it is in the back. It's just too many questions left unanswered, and they're the type of ones that we want to be a little more direct with. Art Boyo. Okay, so really cool story, but again, I don't know what I'm looking at here. I can kind of see a pagoda, but I don't know what it's on. I don't know where it's at. Like I just mentioned, too many questions, not enough problem solving. What is this, a bug? Is this a crystal? Like, I just don't know what I'm looking at, and I mean that sincerely. You got to be just a little bit more clear with what you're showing, and I think a lot of that comes down to the lighting and drafting, the idea out. I think a lot more planning will do you wonders. Okay, so art's by John. Hey, John. This is cool. I mean, it's got a nice, playful, sort of whimsy sort of feel. But again, the coloring on this is really what is kind of holding it back. Like, there's no separation between value and color, through and through. So, like, if we're gonna go with like maybe like a little bit more of like a yellowy or maybe almost like a warm sort of pinkish background, then you can focus on your color shifts, doing something a little more uniform, separately on here. Like, we could see ripples, we can see depth, in the water, a little bit more green kind of going in there. Like, it needs a lot in regards, like, the idea is fine. Let's get that out of the way. The composition itself is pretty fine. I still think you're trying to squeeze it all in, almost like a little too much. So I would probably say you could have gone bigger. Just like literally stretch this thing, out the front of it, or even out the back. And then, higher up this boat, a bit more, so you can frame the character a little more in like there. So yeah, I do like a few subtle differences, but yeah, it's kind of like the coloring just is a little kind of garish and needs a little bit more refinement, especially when it comes to the materials. The materials look kind of like they're all plasticky, which is kind of what goes on in here very similarly. Crunchy Nut and Steven, right? Like, overall pretty cool ideas, both of them. This has got a really nice camera angle for sure, but like it's the rendering and like how the materials are handling, like a lot in here, it comes off as very flat, which is unfortunate because again, I think you did a lot to help really sell this. And the lighting and how like a lot of the background is not nearly as strong as the actual design and the composition itself. So I definitely would get lots of references on skies, on landscape painters, because this is still largely set up in a landscape. You'd want to see how a landscape artist is going to handle something like the sky and how that atmosphere affects, the ground and stuff as it moves across. This is cool too. I mean, but with this, the lighting is still what really holds this back. Like, it's hard to tell the texture of this. Is it like a creature? Is it man-made? Is it metal? And a lot of it's just, there's not a single cool color in this, so it lacks a lot of tonal range when it comes to the neutrals, and particularly using cooler warms and accents and stuff like that. And you could probably separate some of these guys out, put them into the background, have them read as silhouettes. So it needs like a lot of work in the color, but the idea again is really fantastic. And last but not least, Suko here. Now this has got a lot of great style. I love that you explored a lot of different color palettes and scheme for this, which is great. I think my biggest thing with this is, even though it's like a monster transportation system, if I weren't giving the prompt and I looked at this, again, similarly like many of these other I just mentioned, it's too many questions I arise. Like I look at it, I'm like, what is this exactly? What's it doing? How's it working? I think you need to make some of those aspects or elements a little more obvious. The scale is nice. I think almost too big. I think this gets lost. Like I never even noticed you have another shape in the back there. So I'd either lose that or do something more with it. And I'd actually raise the scale up a little bit. Maybe make the trees a little bit more like this. I think it got too big for its own good. Especially if you consider how big and large the doors and windows are compared to how tiny a tree is. So at the same level, you're implying that door is big or bigger than a full grown tree. So there's a lot of scale problems in that regard. And I think just you have the creature itself like kind of drawn at a 3/4 angle, but you're drawing the front of it in the center when it seems like that should be facing, the centerpiece should be like right there. So I still think it needs a little bit more work done on the design front, and then fixing the scale, and then adding in the elements of clarity. All right. So thank you guys for submitting. Sorry yours wasn't chosen, and hope to have you back.